Hello and welcome to Mystery Book Club. I'm Sally Hanley, author of the Holly and Ivy Cozy Mystery Series, and today we are discussing She Left by Stacie Grey, who has graciously joined us for this discussion. And I'm going to turn our meeting over to our moderator, Michelle Chouinard, to do the introduction. Michelle?
Hello. It's awesome to be back. Thank you again for having me and for giving me excuse to come and chat with some of my friends, my author friends. Um, I am the author of the Serial Killer Guide to San Francisco. I am lucky enough to know Stacy in person. And I tried to choose for my three books for this, I tried to choose books that were a little bit different. So one of the things that I love about Stacy is I'm gonna out her right now. I'm gonna dox her. She's also known as Daisy James. She has a series of cozies that she writes excuse me, Daisy
Oh.
Bateman, as Daisy Bateman. So she is multi-talented. She does cozies. She does these that are more thrillery kind of mysteries. And I was lucky enough to read an advanced copy of this book. Absolutely loved it. I love classic mysteries. And then there were none sorts of things. So I was all over this, and that's one of the reasons why I had to pick it and bring it here so I could have people to talk to about it.
Yeah.
So, what I'm thinking I'm going to do here is I am going to basically open up the floor the same way I did last time. Just open up the floor for people to ask any questions that you want. And if you don't have any questions or you have them and forget them, I've got plenty. I've got some personal ones, and we're going to do the reader guide here as needed. But so let me first open up, and it looks like Patty has a question right off the bat.
I don't have a question, but I just wanted to say there was two things I loved about this book. The pace was very eloquent, how it went along. I loved the pace, but the best of all is I liked how you did the subtle backstories, how you wove them in. I have a problem with that, and I just love how you did that. I'm going to use that to educate myself.
Thank you very much. That's the best not a question I've ever gotten.
Thanks.
Does anybody else have a question?
Or a question. I can answer them.
Because I have to second that, actually. I think that I personally love in my current book, I don't have multiple POVs, but I love books that have multiple POVs, and I love books that know how to exploit that well. And I feel like that really happened with this, and it gave a lot of different um it gave different layers and allowed for the placing in of red herringy sort of things. How did other people feel about that?
Great.
I it was really interesting. It's like the old saying, don't judge a person until you've walked a mile in their shoes. And you're getting somebody's opinion of that person, but then you're seeing it through their eyes. And that was really cool to because I too was formulating my opinions based on what the narrator in a certain section would say. And then, you get in there and you go, oh, well, maybe now I understand why that person's the way they are, or why they think the way they do, or why they did what they did. So yeah, yeah, it was a tour de force.
Thank you.
Let's go Peg and then Darlene.
Oh, sorry, I didn't see Darlene's was up there too. No, I thought it was very, it kept me reading, let's put it that way. I thought it was interesting the way that you took the situation 20 years previously and brought them to this new setting. But where did you imagine this being set? I mean, with the landslides and heavy rain, I was curious as to where that was.
Yeah, so I sort of have it in the Sierras, kind of between the foothills and Tahoe. I don't know how familiar you are with California.
I was in Northern California.
Yeah, it would be sort of Northern California in the Sierras.
Lands.
And it's pretty much the only thing that I stretched a little bit on is it's pretty rare to get a rainstorm that big in May, but not impossible, certainly, certainly with climate change. And yeah, a lot of the land there has been shaped by landslides. So that part I think is pretty consistent with the geology.
It was
Darlene,
really,
oh,
Sorry.
sorry.
Oh, no, please go ahead, finish.
No, I'm done.
Oh, okay, sorry. I thought the point of view was very important in the novel because you really were very tight on your motives, including Adam's, which you didn't reveal until, the full extent of it anyway, until near the end. So I thought it was an interesting dynamic that you had the different people tell their own story. I thought it was good.
Thanks.
any other questions that people want to ask?
Well, I
Stacy?
have one more actually. On the, at the end, you don't see it in very many books, but I wondered if your reader's guide at the end was something you found useful. Have you done like other book clubs?
I've done one or two other book clubs. Yeah, the questions, so the questions were, my publisher came up with them, and it did make me sort of have to think about something, how to put into words some of the decisions that I made working on the book, because sometimes you kind of make these decisions and you don't completely formulate your reasons. And so actually sitting down and thinking that through it's actually kind of an interesting creative exercise, even aside from discussing it with a book club.
Yeah, that's I think that I've done reader guides as well, and they're excruciating to have to come up with. So I love that your publisher helped you. But I think as a reader, they're awesome because I don't know, I was the geek who loved English class, right? I was the geek who loved to sit there and go, what does the light mean in Great Gatsby that keeps flashing,
Yeah,
So
the green
that
light.
kind of thing is awesome for me. But okay, so let's take a quick look. My favorite, I think, of your questions in your reader guide is number 4, which is the story touches on the consequences media might have when covering crime stories. How did Therese have to change her life after the murder of her friends because of the stories that were being written about her? And discuss how you feel about true crime media. Do you always think it's ethical? So how do you
Well,
guys feel about the role of media in this book and sort of in general?
so a
They were all
question.
quiet.
Oh, here we go.
I'm
I mean,
sorry.
the media has become a weapon of choice by, people who really know how to exploit it, right? And even in this case where it wasn't political, uh, it wasn't politically driven, the way they hounded her and described her. I mean, the title says it all. She's the one who left. That's what she's going to be known as for the rest of her life, and that she has to live with. And of course, you have to admit you would be suspicious also of the person who left right before this horrible thing happened. But yeah, the media definitely, because they can hunt you down and say things about you and create an impression that is not entirely true. And it doesn't matter what the truth is at a certain point, if it's selling newspapers and if it's sensational. So yeah, every time I don't watch the true crime shows, but when I'm flipping through, sometimes you can't help miss a commercial or get a little snippet of it. And I always wonder about the people who want to actually participate in those shows. Why do they do it? Why would they want to put themselves through it? Because how do you ever get past a horrible trauma if you keep reliving it this way? So yeah, I'm not a fan of this true crime stuff.
Right.
Patty, did you have a comment that you want to make about that?
Oh, have a personal experience with the media and the sensationalism. You know, my husband's ex-wife was murdered, and we were at her wake downtown in Buncombe Street in Greenville, and they took us out the back way because, of course, the police and everybody with the ex-husband, they thought, and we weren't married yet, so yeah, that I mean, they took it upon themselves to think he did it, and so I agree with the social network and all that, but that was before Facebook, so thank God.
Yeah.
Uh-huh.
Yeah. Peg, Darlene, do either one of you want to chime in on this?
No, I think that there is money in the media when
Oh,
they capitalize on the misery of any kind of not just murder, but any kind of mayhem. Just like
Yeah.
you can't watch anything now on TV without it being almost nonstop about LA, only
Yeah.
because, that's what people tune into. And so far as it being ethical, no, but it's a question of money.
I think it's misleading a lot of times, and I had been in situations where I read it in the press and I was like, was I at the same place? So
yes.
I have a little bit of a different view. I didn't like being interviewed because they would always skew it in a way that was silly, or to me was not professional. I yet there's very good writers, but I find they're very biased. It depends on what network you're watching, and that shouldn't be the case. I want somebody who reports the news truly, instead of, oh, everything's peaceful and behind me there's a burning car. Oh, okay.
So
I mean,
I'm
you
gonna,
can't make this stuff up anymore. And it's like, what is the truth?
what is, yeah, so I agree with everything that you guys have said. I think that it's interesting to me. One of the other questions in the list is, would you have gone if you were Therese? Would you have gone to the weekend, right? And I find it really fascinating that the reason that she goes is essentially damage control, right? She's like, oh crap, this is happening again. This is going to come out. What are they going to do? At least if I'm there, I can help shape the narrative, right? And I think that that's a hugely human desire, especially when, you've had this happen to you your whole life. I have very mixed feelings about the true crime genre. I mean, you guys know, because, that I love true crime in terms of, I've always been interested in learning about serial killers and why they do what they do. And I'm a psychologist, so these things fascinate me. I think that how true crime handles stuff, it's so easy to be unethical. And there's so many different ways that you can be unethical, where you can hurt the people that are involved. Like just from Patty, just from that little bit of her story that she told us, you can tell, Patty, that was a traumatizing experience for you
Yeah.
to be pulled into that, right? And you didn't ask for that.
Fingerprinted and the whole bit.
Yeah. And so then I asked, but on the other side of it, the other side that I've heard is that it can help, right? Like sometimes the police will use the media, or try to use the media to get to get help. So one of the things I'm thinking of right now, I've been watching about Leonard Lake and Charles Ng, who up in Calaveras County, did some not so nice things with people. And the media found a bunch of pictures and they put it out, and that helped them identify the women, that were in. So I guess what I'm trying to say is I feel like that there's a good use if it's used that way. But I agree with Peg that anytime money is the motive, I think that the ethics get very tough. So I'm gonna throw it to Stacy and say, what were you thinking when you wrote this? What did you want people to think about this, or did you at all?
Yeah, well, I guess I was less focused on the media. I mean, the media obviously sort of starts the story and carries it for it. And when the murders originally happened, so that would have been basically in 2004, because this is set contemporary. There was certainly plenty of, internet existed, but it was social media was kind of in its infancy. I guess I had to research it. MySpace was just barely starting back then. Um, and yeah, so the media aspect, but really what carries it is unfortunately the fans, like the people who latch on. And I remember, not long around the time I was working on this, there was also in the Sierras a really sad case where a girl had been on it was some sort of school out or a group outing anyway, with a lot of, I think it was through her school. She was a teenager. She may have been drinking. She got turned around in the middle of the night. She was drove a car into the lake and drowned.
Oh,
But she was missing. And in the time she was missing until they found, and it was a ramp that really should have been closed off, and it was dark, and it was clearly an accident. But in the time before they found her and figured out that this was just a kid who'd gotten turned around and accidentally drowned, the internet kind of mobilized, and they found everybody who went to her school, all of the teachers. They pulled up their information, they harassed them online, and there's no profit motive here. There's just people in a feeling of self-importance and wanting to insert themselves into the story. And the amount of damage all of that does to, these poor teenagers who, not only did their friend just die, they get their names, splashed across Reddit, across Twitter, across Facebook by all of these people who've got theories. And that's particularly scary. The media certainly covered it,
Mhm.
but it was more like, and there'd be a story every day, this girl's still missing, search goes on, and then, oh, then they told the story, well, the search found the truck and found the body. So stories, things like that. And, then the horrible thing with the kids in Idaho being killed, some woman decided she was psychic and went on and declared that a professor at the university, and was definitely the person who did it. And, people were attacking this person's house. That is a way where this fandom of true crime because I think people lose track of the fact that this isn't just a fun, cute little thing like hee hee murder. Like these are actual people's lives and people's trauma, and they're turning it into their socializing and their entertainment.
Right.
So that was really where I was coming at it with my feelings about the true crime genre. Um, anyway,
Yeah.
sorry, I got a little carried away there.
No,
That was great.
no, absolutely. And I think that you're exactly right. I think for people, for the fandom, which it's weird that it's even called that, right? But it is. There are people that buy murder artifacts off of eBay, right? That's something I don't understand, but it's a real thing. And but short of that those are obviously a special type of person that's buying Jeffrey Dahmer's shirt or whatever, but I think that when you're so used to watching things on TV that are movies, right? And then you've got this documentary, the line between what's entertainment and what's real. I think you're right, it can get
And some of the
compromised.
documentary makers are certainly pretty irresponsible. There's also the one with the girl who died in a hotel in Southern California, and
Hotel
based on the
Cecil.
facts, sorry?
I think it was the Hotel Cecil is the
Yeah,
documentary.
yeah, and I mean, based on the facts, she probably just had a mental health crisis. But the way they frame that documentary, they really try to make it seem like she was murdered. Um,
Okay, I think maybe we're talking about two different
okay.
documentaries about the same thing, because the I watched one that actually the whole framing of it was the fans on Reddit who have come up with this and that and the other, they just don't have all the facts. And look, when we get all the facts, here's what happened. She
Mhm.
just had a breakdown because she wasn't on her medication and she jumped into the water tower.
Yeah. Okay. I think there were
Drowned.
two. I think there were two documentaries because there was
And that
another one that
was,
was quite a bit more irresponsible.
yeah. See, and that's it. So I think there has been a little bit of a shift towards
Mm-hmm.
there's something else, and I can't remember that I what I was watching, that and they were interviewing law enforcement, and law enforcement was saying, it's very, oh, no, I know what it was. It was a sisters in crime event, and it was somebody who works cold cases was saying, law enforcement always knows things that we don't release, right? And we do that so we can identify the killer when we know, false confessions from whatever. And that it was she was saying it's very frustrating for her to see, all of these Reddit, and subreddits and things where they're like, oh, this. And she's like, you just don't have all the facts. And just, you're never going to be able to have all the facts if police are going to be able to conduct an investigation that allows them to keep that information. But I feel like I have managed to pull this a little farther away from your book, so I'm gonna pull it back to your book, and say one of the things, it's not in the questions list, but one of the things I know from talking to you personally about this was that you wanted to play a little bit with the final girl trope. And
Mm-hmm.
so I wondered if you wanted to say anything about that.
Yeah, well, I mean, that's sort of I have this weird thing where I like horror movies, but I have a lot of trouble watching them. So, but yeah, the whole that deeply genre, the final girl. So that opening scene, I actually, oddly enough, like I say, it was a dream. It was more like lying in bed and thinking of things. But yeah, this girl escaping through the forest. And, first, is it a horror movie? Is she being pursued? But what actually, if she, this thing where she seems to be being pursued is actually she's just leaving something and everybody else is dead, was kind of, I mean, that was the genesis of the book. And yeah, but being the final girl, but not in the horror movie way, sort of.
One of the
And it's your
things
story.
I don't, yeah, I'm talking over everybody else, so I should let everybody else have a chance. Does anybody want to talk about that?
Well, for me, it was completely, I've got to admit, we've got a late entry here. I'm going to admit this person just now. Um, it was immediately, and then there were none, right? Because the first time I ever had any connection was I saw the black and white movie back in the 50s, okay? And then we did in this mystery book club quite a long time ago, though. I don't think anybody who's here now, except for me, was part of that. We read, and then there were none to see uh, what we thought about that. So that aspect of it was, you know, I loved that. It's immediately it puts you in a, and you're coming to with this remote location, and then nobody can get out, and it's just you can't. I don't. I don't think you can overdo that, right? I think it's just it's a perfect setup for exactly what you did with the rest of the story. It's a trope, so to speak, right? But my theory is, like tropes are always frowned on, like, it's overused and but it's not. It's the creativity of the writer that takes that trope and turns it into something completely different and new and fresh. And this was, and I kind of I didn't think horror story at all. And the idea of this house collapsing and sliding down the mountain was like, okay, so now let's add one more horrible thing to happen to them that was not like, uh a killer in the wall somewhere or some ghost, it was a very real thing that might have killed them all. And also, the fact that this main character, it like when you realize how as a uh an agent, an actual police agent, like these guys, well, who are you to be in charge, right? But she was the most practical. And I mean, I have to say, I loved the scene where she went down to retrieve the the woman's body. And then the policeman thought, you know, like, oh, anybody could do this. And then he gets stuck down there. That was kind of fun. But yeah, so to me, it was not horror story genre. It was Agatha, you know, it says that on the front about Agatha Christie, and it was very Christie-esque for me, and I loved it.
I felt the same way, Sally. As soon as I realized that this was going to be a room full of suspects, I actually wrung my hands and said, I'm ready. Yes. And that's the first thing I thought of was, and then there were none. A very interesting setup.
And it was, yeah, I have to say, there were, and as far as the like who done it, I thought it was different people at different times for sure. And so that was also extremely well done. It wasn't like, okay, I hit on it, and because I suspected Adam, but then I didn't. You know, when other characters, these other stories would come to the foreground, I think, oh, it's probably that one. And yeah, and then you have the only way in when I forget who was murdered in the room next to the one fellow. The only way in was through his room, and so he had to have done it, right? You know, so no, that it was yeah, it kept me guessing, and then that's the thing. Somebody said, you know, you wanted to keep getting back to the book. I'm a slow reader, so I never, you know, people pick these up and read them through in an afternoon. Not me. I can't do it no matter what. But I couldn't wait to sit back down when I had the time to pick it back up and continue reading.
Yeah, I loved the modernization of this because one of the things for me is when you're writing something that happened in, I think, when did she write that? In the 20s, the 30s? It was a long time ago, right? Almost 100 years ago now. There were no cell phones, right? There were no.
Right.
So how today do you trap, you know, a handful of people into a house and they have no way to get away? And so, you know, as I'm starting to read this book, I was like, all right, how's she going to deal with cell phones? And I loved how she dealt with the cell phones.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I thought too, looking at who actually, you know, was behind all the murders, I thought it was very clever the way that you gave them like alibis at various, I mean, because I did think it was what was his name, Adam?
Right.
I thought that's who had done it also, but then you revise your thinking depending upon who had what alibi.
Right.
And it was hard to kind of keep track of, oh, where was this one and where was that one? So yeah, it was good from that standpoint too.
And another thing that I liked about the modernization of it was, and I feel like you modernized not just and then there were none, but like you were saying, like I was saying, the final girl thing. Therese is now, she's in charge of her destiny, right? She's the one who ends up saving them all with the help, right, of Leilani, which I found, I just, chef's kiss, because, right, so many people in today's society would look at someone like Leilani, and if they even saw her, right, if their eyes just didn't skip over her, they would certainly underestimate her, right? But then her friends are the ones that are like, yeah, we didn't like this, so we were gonna check it out. And then when her phone stopped working, we were like, no. So I just thought that not only are women the heroes of this, but the ability to kind of take those things that would have been very different in the books of the past and wrestle them around and modernize in that way was great. I thought. Did anybody else have ideas about that?
Yeah, it was Lorelei was her name, right? Lorelei.
Not Leilani.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh, I'm so bad with names. I'm sorry,
No,
Lorelei. Thank you.
I think there were two because I was thinking the same thing, but I think Leilani was somebody that she worked with. Lorelei was the one that went out with.
Okay. Okay.
That
Lorelei
explains how it went in my head. But yeah, sorry.
Well, I have to say at the beginning, because I read and put the book down and pick it back up. I had to make myself a little cheat sheet of all the characters because what I was challenged with was that there were victims, five, six victims, and then who was connected to them. And so once I made myself this little cheat sheet, and I never got lost again when I picked it back up. But yeah, Lorelai, I have Crazy Woman in the Park, and yeah, it's interesting because that was a character that everybody would be dismissive of. And I thought, I think she's going to have an important, and she was very observant, and she just was watching everybody, and yeah, I enjoyed that character too.
Yeah, she was fun to write. I liked her a lot. And
Yeah,
yeah,
I
I
feel
did love her friends. If I were to do any sort of follow up to this, I think I'd probably want to get them involved in their
I
produce
would
truck.
read that book. I would read that for sure. Yes, please do write that.
It's funny, was she your favorite character or in the book?
I don't know. I mean, I spent the most time with Therese, so I
Yeah.
was probably the closest to her. Lorelai was more fun to write, I would say. And Wendy was all because she was a little over the top, was also pretty fun to write. Uh, Even if I did find her a little annoying, but I mean, I made her annoying, so.
Yeah, you
I
succeeded at that. Yes.
One of my favorite lines in the book was she was like, I always did have bad taste in men. It's like, all right, some self-awareness. There you go.
Oh.
So what about was there anything else about this book that stood out for anybody?
Well, the interesting thing too was going back to get at the victims, the original victims, and they were not very nice people. You didn't feel too bad that they all got imploded, but yeah, that was an interesting thing that kept you engaged as well, wondering, like, uh you had Wendy's perspective. Wendy even got challenged at some point of her perspective of these people, right? When other things came out about them and how, their childhood or their parents or whatever it was, which was kind of interesting that, but Wendy also had to face the fact that she too played into these mean girl games at times with these characters. Um, so yeah, you had all those characters running through your head too. Like Oliver was the gay fellow, but he knew how to play the game so that he took whatever came his way, but he knew how to give it back to other people. So yeah, you were that was kind of it was really complex when you're keeping those characters in your head and relating them to these other characters, especially when you had a character like Victor, right? Who he was the one who was not likable.
Mhm.
He was just annoying. He just was kind of rude to everybody. And now he was Josh's friend. See, I'm even
Mhm.
looking now.
It is a lot of characters. It's a problem when
Yeah.
you want to get so many people, is you need to start with a lot.
Yeah, you do.
Yeah.
And you have to
Yeah.
differentiate them, and that's not easy. And and it's also, I mean, this is one of the things that I think you do really well in all of your books and that I've read, which is that you give me very distinct characters very quickly, I think. And in this book, you did go into backstories and things like that, but I felt like, apparently, except for Leilani and Lorelai, I thought you did a great job of creating these different characters. How did everybody else? Did anybody else have a favorite character?
I didn't have I wouldn't say a favorite character, but I did wonder how, was it Sylvia, the mother, of the boy the mother who supposedly put all this together, how she did the background to know who to get to represent the ones who had died. You know, like Jenna, that made sense to have Adam, but you know, some of the other connections, I thought that took a lot of time, and would somebody really do that?
I guess in my mind, she was pretty obsessed,
Yeah.
you know, that her son's death and, you know, and everything that had come after had kind of broken her. So she sort of devoted herself to putting this together. And she was also pretty sure she was bringing, though I don't think she knew exactly who the killer was. These were the people she thought could have been the killer, and she was going to bring them together and, in her mind, somehow get the answers she wanted about what happened to her son.
Yeah, she didn't think it through though.
No, no,
She did not think it through.
unfortunately, she put a
Yeah,
lot of effort, but perhaps not a lot of intelligence got into it.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
But I could see an obsessed parent think that they could somehow make this happen. And she did involve the policeman,
Mhm.
right? She had him there, and I have to say, one of the, you know, like when people would go off and do something on their own, I thought this is not going to be good. This is not going to end good, right? That much I have to say. I did when he went off to try and get the car started. I thought, no,
Like in the horror movies, don't go into the barn,
yeah, yeah,
Get in that room.
don't go in the cellar.
He was taking a little too long. And then, of course, I just realized the one who was the most the character you disliked the most, I most certainly disliked the most, was the prison guard.
Hmm.
I mean, if he had a redeeming quality, I don't know what it was. He was really kind of awful, right? He was
Well,
rude
we
to everybody. He was, yeah, he was not nice.
How about, does anybody else have a least favorite character?
No,
Think that's another challenge to this type of a book, is that if you want to give people motives, necessarily they're going to have to be unlikable to a degree, right? Because you're being able to picture them committing a murder. So to be able to write a book where your reader is invested and has somebody to root for, right? Which we always did have Therese, but still it's tough to read a book. I just read a psychological thriller, which I will not name, where there was not a single likable person in it. And it necessarily had to be that way, but it just makes your brain hurt after a while. Like it needs some place to land. And I think to be able to write in nuanced characters enough that they're unlikable, but at the same time, you don't just flat out hate them. You know, I think that takes skill. And I liked that about this book.
Now you had so many characters. How did you keep them straight? And when did you figure out the sequence? Was that difficult for you?
Um, well, some of it was driven by obviously they had to do their bit before they died. So if the characters who were going to die had to go at a certain order. I didn't want the killer, I actually have the killer going first because I didn't want it. I had to has him out of the way because after he starts committing more murders, it's going to be harder to have him thinking about things that weren't giving away that he'd committed the murders. So yeah, some of it was to do with the action in the story. Like I wanted to put their perspective close to a scene that they had been in which they'd been important. And some of it just came down to how it fit with other things that I needed to get done within the story.
how do you keep track of the scenes? Do you use things like Post-it notes or?
I tend to forget and then go back and discover that's where it was. I actually moved quite a few things around in this book in the drafts. Some conversations happened because in a previous draft I'd had too long of a talky bit in the middle, so I moved up some conversations and condensed them. Um, So that was a bit tricky because trying to remember that now this happens before that and etc. Um,
Do you use any particular software when you do that to move sections around?
no, I do everything in Pages. Um, I've got a I've got my main document, and then I've got a document where I keep all of the stuff that I've cut in case I want to go back and use it. I almost never do, but it makes me feel better not to just delete it. Um,
I'm curious about your character development because, as I said in the beginning, it was hard for me until I wrote this note down, and then of course they just become more and more fully developed as you read their backstories or as action takes place. Do you write did you develop this list of characters and then do character studies, or did they just come to you as you wrote?
more that they came to me as I wrote. I start with fairly thin character ideas, and then as things happen, as they do things, as I have them do things, I think of aspects of their characters, and then that sort of feeds back in and for in future drafts to who they are and how they how they are thin throughout the book.
Wow, interesting. That can't be easy. You have to be very smart.
It's how it works for me. Other people do thorough character sketches when they start. It's all about what process works for you.
Well, I make mine up as I go along, but I don't have as complex a cast of characters as you do. This was tough. Yeah.
Yeah, I imagine that's for me, I love diving into my characters' heads. So I'm very similar to Stacy in how I do that. So but yeah, I agree that working out in a very closed circle, very small space ways to communicate all this information, and that is that has to be tough. So I'm gonna switch here to another question, and then I'm gonna have one after that. I'm gonna have one final question. I'm gonna ask Stacy what's next for her, and if there's other books on the table. But one of being who I am, I love the question about how does the theme of memory come into play in this story. Discuss how the characters remember the same events differently and what implications this has on their motivations at the reunion. Does anybody have any thoughts on that? While you're thinking, I will say, I am fascinated with, I've always been fascinated with I'm not sure if I'm saying it right, Rashomon, which is this Japanese movie from the 50s with all of these different characters have different perspectives and they're all wrong, right? And it personally for me, it makes me wonder when I go through my day, like how much of what I'm perceiving and thinking is happening is just flat out wrong, you know?
I read the question, but I couldn't place exactly where she had misperceived her what had happened to her. I mean, she resisted the fact that, or resented the fact that she was perceived as a killer because of having left. But so far as what had actually happened, it wasn't really clear that she was misremembering. I mean, it seemed pretty accurate that she had had the fight and was not real comfortable or didn't feel like she was really accepted into that crowd. But the fact whether or not that was a right or wrong perception, I didn't really get.
It's been a couple of weeks since I read the book, but I do remember, and I'm not, I won't have the exact detail, but I know there was an occasion where one of the friends revealed something to Therese that made her see it wasn't how she remembered it, and it made her see something different. And yeah, I mean, I know we must all experience this too, and I find it more and more the older I get, like my sister and I will talk about the same event and we don't have at all the same memory of it. Like who was there, what was the purpose of the event, like really, no, they weren't there. Yes, they were. And so yeah, memory. And I could see why if you're a police person trying to piece stuff together, especially for a cold case, it's like what people remember, first of all, what they perceive is not the same thing. So how they remember it is definitely not going to be the same either. It's tough.
And context matters, right? So one of the things I'm thinking of is the comment when the sister had said, "I get everything," right? And so to Amy hears that one way, and that
Right.
puts this whole interpretation on a situation. And then how does that affect the actions that you take? And especially after, oh gosh, I can't math, but however many years this has been, right, since this happened, how many times has your brain reworked this to where you become convinced that this person was X, you know? And that's frightening, I think.
Yeah, that was kind of the key moment that I was going for. That sort of, I guess one of the themes for this was, yeah, so it's not necessarily that she misremembered facts, but in order to solve the mystery, she had to take herself out of the center of the story. She was 16, and at 16, everything's about you. And in order to see what really happened, she had, ironically, because she is the main character, she had to get over her main character syndrome. That, she was centering everything that happened that night around her and her feelings, but all of the other people had their own lives. And so the process sort of starts, I think, for her when she's talking to Joseph and, everything he's challenging her perception, so the events she remembers are the same, but her perception of them is that it was fine, that everybody thought this was really funny. It wasn't at all a bullying thing. And then she has to look and see that, oh no, she wasn't necessarily always the good guy. And that, and she wasn't just the victim. She was actually participating.
Right.
And these were also, these were kids, that the things they were doing, they seem so awful, but they're also all 16. And nobody is a fully formed human at this point. So there's kind of some grace that needs to be given to these kids for that part. But because she was 16 at the time, her memory has kind of aged with her. And now she has to step back and look and be like, no, those aren't people like me now. Those are children who are doing those things. So that's kind of where, yeah, memory and perception of yourself, like as growing up, you have to reevaluate how you saw things when you were young and the way that you saw things through the eyes of a teenager, that maybe you weren't, decenter yourself in some things.
Yeah,
I
don't
thought
know.
it was interesting. Sorry.
Go ahead, please.
I thought it was interesting how you showed the effect it had on her, which I thought was very moving, and I thought it was realistic. That, you try to get away from your problems, but they're there regardless, because that's not an event that you can forget for sure. Especially when people are putting the blame on you. I mean, how do you escape that even in your own mind?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that's a tough question. And, how do you not get stuck being that person? Like, how do you heal out of that? That's a tough question, I think. So, I mean, it makes what this character manages to do that much more impressive, I think. So, well, let me open it one last time. Are there any other questions that you would like to ask Stacy before I go into the home stretch here? Process, characters, anything. All right, then I'm gonna go ahead and ask you, what is next? What do you have for us next, please?
Well, next, you can sort of see it up there. I even have a little bookmark. It's this is my next book. You can see it's called She Didn't Stand a Chance. It's quite different. It's set in Palm Springs in a very fancy modernist house. I've called it's my the short pitch is it's Succession if the dad died and the fifth kid showed up to solve the murder. Um, yes, it's coming out in August. It's about a young woman who is called back to a family home where she hasn't been since she was 3. She is the daughter, the youngest child of a rich older man from his second marriage, and she's seeing her which marriage that ended very quickly, so she never really knew her father. But he has now died, and she's gone back to visit his house where her siblings, who are all, 40 or so years older than she is, are there, and she picks up that something is wrong, and finds that she's been included in the will in a shocking way.
Mm.
So
And when does that come out?
August 12th.
August 12th. So right around the corner, because this year
Yeah.
is zooming past.
Yeah.
Um, and I might have some insider information that you're working on another book too.
I am. I am just about finished with my next book called She Had Enough. I think you may see a trend here in titles, which has to do with a murder that happens directly after a major earthquake hits San Francisco.
This,
Well, that's not plausible. A major earthquake hitting San Francisco.
So that'll be out in 2026.
Oh, wow.
And okay, so for my own personal, just because I always have to ask you this, how is it balancing, writing these two different genres?
Well, I mean, I'm not currently writing the cozies, so that series is on hold and has been for a bit. So, no, it is fine. I do have to I have to restrain some of my cozy instincts when I'm writing thrillers. I get a number of notes from my agent like you can't have a cat in this book. So then in the next book I put 3 cats and made them important to the plot. So
Compensation. I like it. And well, and I mean, your cozies are very funny. So, and it must be kind of hard to pull back on that humor sometimes.
yeah, no, and that's the other note I get is like this is too jokey. I think I got a little bit more humor into She Didn't Stand a Chance. I'm getting in some of the early reviews, people are mentioning the humor, but I did have to cut a lot of jokes. So yeah, my approach a lot of the time is just put it in and see what I can get away with, and then take it out later.
Like the book in the background about the killer mosquitoes,
Oh
right?
yeah.
In this one.
That did become that was actually I used to do a newsletter where I would share all of my terrible book ideas. Um, and that was one of them. And so I decided since I was never going to write the mosquito book because when I mentioned to my agent, she just said, "I'm going to pretend you never said that." Um, so I put it in, she left instead. Yeah.
Bye, Patty. Okay, so that signals to me that we're coming up to the end here and that I
have
should
to
wrap
go to
up.
work. Excuse me, I have to go to work.
Oh,
I'm sorry to hear that.
yeah.
It's volunteer, so it's fine.
Oh, that's
Okay.
awesome.
Okay.
Well, I think it is time to wrap up, so I will just say,
Alright.
any last minute anything that anybody wants to chime in on here?
Well, I would just like to thank you very much for moderating Mystery Book Club this third quarter. It was a pleasure. Your choices were really enjoyable to read.
Yes.
And I'd just like to close with a little, I forgot to mention this last month. After Malice Domestic, I ran into Katrina McPherson, and we had read In Place of Fear. Well, there's a second book out, folks, The Edinburgh Murders, based on the same characters. So if
Oh.
anybody wanted to follow up with that. And now let's see if I can just share with you what's coming up next quarter. Melissa Westemeyer, let's see, is our is our moderator. She's a Sister in Crime member from Wisconsin, and she has written a series called None the Wiser. Her main character is a retired nun. So that is an interesting series, but we're starting out with M.K. Graff's Death in the Orchard. I don't know anything about that book. Melissa could not moderate in August, so I am pinch hitting. And I picked a book that I have just read recently called Those We Thought We Knew. And it is an amazing book written by a Southern writer, David Joy, and it will give us lots and lots to talk about. So that's what's coming up next month, starting next month, and that email will go out tomorrow. And so I thank you all for joining us.
Thank you so much,
so much for
Stacy, for
having us,
coming.
having me.
And
It was so
yeah,
good.
thank you so much.
Yes, Stacy, thank you. It was really a pleasure to have you join us. And yeah, I look forward to seeing you all next time. And the recording will be posted probably early next week of this meeting. So
Thank
We
you.
still recording?
we're still recording. I can end my session right now. No, if I do that, I'm going to end the session. I want to stop recording, don't I? I want to